What if I told you you don't elect the president? That's right. In the United States, we don't elect our president by popular vote. So today we're going to talk about the Electoral College and sort of how our elections in the United States work. So the Electoral College was set up by our founding fathers as a way to basically ensure the safety of presidential elections. It has had a lot of controversy and changes throughout American history, but the basics are that each state gets a certain set of electoral votes based on their population. So the way we get that number, we use the census every 10 years. And this is also when we change the number of representatives that we get per state. So basically after the census every 10 years, they take the number of representatives for each state and add the number of senators that state gets. So that's two, and that is how many electors each state gets. So if you look at North Carolina, you can see North Carolina has 16 electors or electoral votes. That means that we have 14 House of Representatives members and 2 senators, and that is how it's determined. After every 10 years, after the census every 10 years, it can change, and those votes are always changing and are distributed. It will always total to 538. So the number is set, but how many each state gets might change. So like if the population of one state goes down and the population of another state goes up, they might change it, right? Now you may notice I said 538, but wait a minute, Miss Jones, there are only 535 representatives and senators. How did you get the extra 3? Well, that's because Washington, D.C. gets 3 electoral votes. So because Washington, D.C. doesn't have any representation in Congress, they get no House of Representatives members, they get no senators, but they're still citizens of the United States. They still get to vote in our presidential elections. So it was determined that Washington, D.C., based on their population and the city size, they get 3. So that is where we get the number 538 electoral votes. Now, the way that the Electoral College works is that every political party in a state gets to choose their 16 electors. So the Republican Party has 16, the Democratic Party has 16. This is in North Carolina, obviously. And each political party gets their own set of electors. It varies state to state how electors are chosen. They cannot hold office themselves. They have to be unbiased in that way, but obviously they are a member of the political party. When you go to the polls to vote in November, you are not voting for your candidate. You are voting for those electors. So if you take a look here at this ballot, you will notice that this is obviously the ballot from 2016. We've got our candidates on this side. So Trump and Pence, Clinton and Kaine, the Libertarians, the Green parties. But you'll notice that over here, it lists the names of the electors. So this tells you the names of the people that you're actually voting for. These are the people who will then be sent to vote for the candidate that they are associated with. So technically, these are the people you are voting for. Obviously, every state has their own electors. Then what happens after the general election in November? Those electors in December will go on to cast their official ballot as part of the Electoral College. Almost every state, 48 of our 40 or 50 states, are under what's called a winner-take-all system. So what this means is the candidate in that state with the highest votes, the biggest popular vote, gets all of that state's electors. So in North Carolina in 2016, we primarily voted, our popular vote was majority Trump instead of Clinton. So all 16 of North Carolina's electors went to Donald Trump. So all of our electors voted for Republicans, voted Republican because that is the way that our state voted. So the winner of the state gets all of the electors, hence winner take all. Now, there is 2 exceptions. Those two exceptions are Maine and Nebraska. Maine and Nebraska are on a delegate system, which means that their electoral votes can be split between candidates. It's possible for all of their votes to go to one candidate, but they don't. Some of their votes do go to their state's popular votes, but the other ones are determined via the districts in their state. This is possible because they don't have huge districts in Maine and Nebraska. For a state like California with 54 electors, that would mean that all 52 districts in the state of California would get their own vote. That would get complicated. A lot of people think that this is more fair, though, that it more equally represents the districts in the state rather than the winner take all. It doesn't take, you could win the popular vote by just 1 or 2 votes and still get the whole state, even though half the state was not voting for that person. So that's just something to kind of think about when we're looking at this. To win the presidency, a candidate needs 270 of the 538 electoral votes. You'll often see this called the road to 270. That is the majority that is needed in order to win the presidency. If no candidate gets 270 electoral votes, then it goes to the House of Representatives and to the Senate. The House chooses the president, the Senate chooses the vice president. Typically, they're still going to be the one, they give it to the one that has the most votes. Doesn't always happen that way. In 2000, there was a whole other issue, which we'll talk about later, where it actually went to the Supreme Court. And it's the only time in our history that the presidency was decided by the Supreme Court, not by the electoral votes or the House. But ultimately, what you need to get from this here, you vote for the electors. The electors then are granted based on the popular vote. They go and vote, give all of their votes for that one candidate, except in Maine and Nebraska, and that person that gets 270 electoral votes wins the presidency. As you can imagine, this is controversial. We are the only democratic country in the world that doesn't directly elect our leader, right? That we elect people who then elect our leader. It's kind of strange. No other country has ever had an electoral college. There are obviously a lot of people who don't like it. Some of the cons, it's said that states with lots of electors like California or Texas, California has 54, Texas has 40, they have so much influence. And those states are usually pretty safe one way or the other. California is usually pretty safe Democrat. Texas is usually safe Republican, which means that's a huge chunk of electors just from that one state, which can have a huge influence in the election. It also means that a candidate can lose the popular vote and still win an election because of the way the electoral votes are distributed, because you don't have to split those votes. It's possible for a state to be pretty 50-50 split, but their votes are all going to go to one candidate or another. This has been the case in a lot of recent elections. Donald Trump, for instance, did not get the popular vote in 2016 when he was elected. Hillary Clinton had the popular vote, but Donald Trump had the electoral votes. The other big thing is that swing states get a lot of attention. So swing states are those states that have a pretty significant number of electors that are undecided. And basically it's the idea that that state can go either way, Republican or Democrat. And because they have a significant number of electors, then chances are pretty good that they can swing the election one way or the other. North Carolina has historically been a battleground state. North Carolina is pretty on the fence with Republican versus Democrat. It has gone both ways in many elections. We have 16 electoral votes. That's a lot. It is possible that North Carolina could make or break an election. Pennsylvania is another one. Florida is another one. Ohio is one. These are states that it's not a sure thing, and a lot of candidates have to put all their attention on those states, which means that states that don't have a lot of electoral votes, like North Dakota, which only has 3, often get ignored in these elections. The last big issue here is that there is no constitutional mandate or law in place that says an elector has to go to the popular vote. It's entirely possible for electors to go rogue. This is something called a faithless elector. It means we have put our faith that the electors are going to go with the candidate we have chosen. but they could get to the vote and then completely throw it up in the air and be like, I'm not voting the way they chose. I don't want to. It's very rare. It almost never happens, but it can happen, and it has happened. Not in recent history, but it is possible. And so that, again, if they don't vote the way that they're supposed to, and there's nothing saying that they have to, it doesn't even represent the popular vote. The point is for Electoral College to represent the popular vote, but if they don't vote that way, then they don't, right? Last but not least, I want to talk about the pros. If all of this might sound like, well, then why do we even have it? What's the point, right? Like, these all sound like bad things. Why do we still have it? That's because there are some positives to the Electoral College. First of all, it gives a certainty to presidential elections because you have to have a set number of votes. And because it's so small, right? 270 compared to the thousands and millions of people that live in this country, it's pretty easy to declare that majority. It prevents the call for recounts or runoffs. Because we are giving all of the votes to the state, because it's a winner-take-all system, it doesn't matter what the majority is. They get all of the electoral votes. So it pretty much prevents any need for that. It prevents the need for runoffs. We do not have runoffs for presidential elections. We have them for other elections, but not presidents. And basically, it means that it's more stable, right? It has a surety to it that otherwise elections could go on forever and there could never be a winner declared and it could be a whole big thing, right? Whereas this, it's pretty clear and it has a pretty clear timeline. The other thing is that it protects the voices of minorities from being overwhelmed by the will of the majority. The idea here is in states that have large rural populations, because we're not doing it by the millions, but by the few hundreds, it gives their vote more say. Smaller states with smaller populations tend to really like the Electoral College. Rural areas over cities tend to really like the Electoral College because it gives them more of a say. Whereas like an urban area with a larger population can kind of overwhelm those rural areas, right? So it kind of allows everybody's vote to be a little bit more equal. That's sort of the idea behind it. So even though in the winner-take-all system it can, go overwhelmingly one way or the other, it still allows those minority voices to be heard. It ensures, again, that all parts of the country have a say in selecting the president. In theory, because of the way that this works, like the presidents do have to campaign to all states. Even though states like North Dakota or Alaska have smaller populations, their electoral votes still count. Every last electoral vote counts in an election. So if you get 3 here, 3 here, 3 there, 4 there, 5 there, those add up. If the other guy only gets California, that's 54 votes, but that's still short. You still got to get those little states. So the idea is that they still get a say, right? And that's really the biggest advantage to this. So the timeline for the Electoral College is pretty straightforward. The general election happens on the first Tuesday of November. That is when the popular vote takes place. That's when we, as citizens, get to go and cast our ballots. The unofficial results start coming in pretty immediately that evening. The ballots are counted, and it is usually pretty clear one way or another which way the state is going to go. Then, by December, so the first Tuesday after the second Wednesday in December, which I think is just maybe the third Tuesday in December. I don't know why it's so complicated. The electors meet to cast their ballots for each individual state. Those ballots are held until January 6th, which is when the official results are counted by the House of Representatives. And when there is a majority called, a 270 vote majority, a new president is declared. Generally, we know who it is before the electoral votes are counted, but that is when it's official. That's when the House of Representatives officially says this person received the majority votes. And then the president is elected inaugurated on January 20th. So it's a pretty quick turnaround time, and that's one of the advantages of the Electoral College. So we'll continue talking about the Electoral College and its advantages and disadvantages and why it's there and why it exists more in class, but this just gives you a good overview. Hope you learned a little something, and I'll see you in class. Bye.
Electoral, Electoral College, we've got a tale to tell.
So what if we don't have a football team? At least we never have to write a theme. No classes, no professors, no tuition. Yet we're the goal of every politician. 'Cause everyone who graduates becomes a president.
I'm gonna send your vote to college when you vote for president. And if you'll let me share some knowledge, you'll understand this big event. The folks who wrote our Constitution had the idea for this plan, and it's been used in our elections since our government began. When you pull down on my levers for the person of your choice, you're also choosing state electors who will have the final voice. They're called the Electoral College, and they'll meet to stipulate who the voters have selected to be the winner in each state. Now the number of electors that your state is going to get is based on total population. That's the formula that's set. And when the popular vote is counted to find a winner in each state will pledge all of its electors to choose the winning candidate.
I like it. I like it.
Electoral, Electoral College, and we deserve a yell.
And even if the vote is close and someone wins by just a little tiny hair, the electors give that person all their votes, and it's considered fair and square. I'm gonna send your vote to college when you vote for president. And now the Electoral College will work the way our founders meant. So what if they don't have a big macho football team?
It's every politician's special dream.
'Cause everyone who graduates,
Yes, everyone who graduates,
every